when you win at the wrong thing, you lose at the right thing. So I was winning in success. I was winning in preaching all around the world and speaking and people knowing my name when I walked in rooms, and I was winning behind the pulpit of accolades from the people, but I was losing at home. What I realized in that moment, that it's impossible to keep up with who we pretend to be. If my goal was to please people, I can't please the call on my life. The weight that is on our shoulders, we have to have safe places to do this. We gotta have vulnerable places where people listen without the need to respond. One time my counselor sat there and I was like, I paid her $350 an hour just to listen.
Yep.
And I'm like, man, I'm lonely. Bro, isn't it crazy how many people could follow? I looked at your Instagram, 5 million people.
Yeah.
How lonely we feel sometimes.
Heavy. Safe space in a brave place. This is an exciting session. It's a brother that I admire, who is the author of 2 = 1, and really a great believer, a great thought leader, the one and only Jimmy Rollins. Once again, it's an honor, privilege, and a pleasure to be joined in a safe space and a brave place, to seek counsel and to cultivate. And the counselor today, the expertise in this space, is a best-selling author. As you can see, 2 = 1 is the latest offering. And this brother is 25 years full-time in ministry, nationally recognized speaker, but most importantly, husband, father.
That's it. That's it.
And marriage coach.
Yeah.
Here to counsel me on all of those things.
Come on.
The one and only Jimmy Rollins.
Wow, man.
My brother.
Much love, my friend.
You ain't got to stand up, but
yeah.
bring the love in.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Man, thanks for coming
crazy.
all the way out here
Absolutely.
to counsel, man, to fellowship. Man, so much to unpack, so much to build on.
Here we are.
2 = 1. You know, you and your better half have inspired so many, man. And even when we connected, it was like I need some of that.
Come on.
You know what I mean? True success. But it doesn't go without challenges.
Wow.
Doesn't go without
That's
obstacles. Right. And you have such a great testimony. So brothers like myself need to hear from you.
Yeah.
In this forum, man. I built this space to, encourage the mental wellness of our community,
That's
but
great.
Also to help build us be the best men that we can possibly be, take accountability, ask tough questions, and receive tough answers. So where do we begin? With the origin story, man, in your space of ministry? And then I definitely want to talk about, your struggles in the space of, even the pressures of being in the pulpit every day, but still
the glass.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Bowl, the fish bowl.
And if we keeping it real and being honest, man, you struggle with everything from addiction to your home being, not as present or not as much as one would think that, a pastor's home should be, man. So I would love to dig into a lot of that, in this first session, and just as we go from session to session, just build on, your journey and how you overcame all those obstacles.
Well, first, honored, man.
Yeah.
Honored. I've been behind the scenes, wilding out with my kids, trying to stay young.
Right.
And,
Appreciate it.
Irrelevant.
Yeah.
My kids said, "Don't mess it up, Dad. Don't tell no corny jokes. You're 50." You know what I'm saying? So, turned 50 this year.
Oh man, congratulations.
And I feel like half my life is just beginning.
Yeah.
It's not halftime.
Yeah.
We're about to go into overtime.
There it is.
Right?
I love it.
I think the origin, was just start out, man. Growing up, I was a PK.
Yeah,
pastor's
likewise.
kid.
Likewise.
So I was real bad.
Yeah, we had to prove that we fit in. We had to do worse.
I had to give them stories for their sermons.
Right.
And I just always had a proclivity to help people.
Yeah.
And but never honestly the smarts didn't feel like had ADD growing up and dyslexia and couldn't read well, and I was like, what do I have to offer?
Right.
And I even remember my mom and dad saying, "Oh, you got a purpose and a call." What is that?
Right.
I just was waking up every day. How we gonna have fun?
Yeah.
And I think what I started to realize the older I got is our story is our gift.
Mm-hmm.
Our story is our gift to ourselves to give away to the world. And when we think about that, like the only thing I'm in control of is my story. And, you know, whether I get up, whether I stay down, if I fall. And I think that mindset started in me young. And, but I played basketball. You know, I ate my way out of that position. I don't know if you can tell. But I remember I was pretty good, and we would lose a game, but I had good stats. And, you know, maybe I got, 20 buckets, whatever it was, 20 points. And my dad would say, son, you wanted the wrong thing. And I never understood what that meant until I got older. And I realized that when you win at the wrong thing, you lose at the right thing. So I was winning in success. I was winning in preaching all around the world and speaking and people knowing my name when I walked in rooms, and I was winning behind the pulpit of accolades from the people, but I was losing at home. You know, I could build a kids ministry in our church, but had no relationship with my own kids. I could preach and talk to thousands, but couldn't talk to my wife, the one I lay next to every night. And honestly, man, that came out of insecurity and fear and growing up with learning disabilities and never feeling successful. So the first thing that I started feeling successful in is a thing that I made my idol. And the pulpit became my idol, man. It became the safe space. It became the place where I was losing physically with my weight. I was losing emotionally with my insecurities. I was losing spiritually with, visiting pornography, regularly as medication. I found out in counseling.
Wow.
And, I was turning to the wrong things.
Wow.
To medicate me.
That's amazing. I mean, for you to be so candid and vulnerable to speak about, we don't hear that from our pastors and our leaders of the struggles and, the pressure of. I almost feel like it's double, because not only are you struggling with what every person struggles with, but you have to struggle with the perception of perfection.
It's real.
And so you feel probably twice as bad. Or you feel, that you got to climb out of the hole is twice as deep. So when did you know you were at the bottom, at your lowest?
My lowest, I candidly remember it. We had our first Easter service when I had taken my parents' church and launched mine, and 3,000 people showed up. It was crazy. Like, that's a big deal in the church world. Here's this young guy. And I got out and I preached and I gave a sermon, and people, loved it. And I remember the accolades, but I was broken and I was hurting. And I had questions in my mind that morning, like, why are you using me to help people when I need help myself? And what nobody knew is although all those people showed up, I hadn't seen my wife for 2 weeks because I was staying in a hotel until on the front row that Sunday morning.
Wow.
And after that service, I went back into the green room. I fell on my face and I said, I'm tired of being phony. And what I realized in that moment, that it's impossible to keep up with who we pretend to be. And if my goal was to please people, I can't please the call on my life. And it hit me.
Yeah.
It hit me like a ton of bricks.
Wow.
And I remember making a phone call that Monday, telling somebody who I valued their voice in my life, I can't do this no more. And he showed up the next day, and we got a plan to get healthy.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you speak of the phoniness, and I think this is going to help so many, because whether you're using the facade as a black man, facade in a relationship, society's measurement, for you, what was your facade? But specifically, how did you know it was a facade and not, this is just what I'm supposed to be doing?
I think there's nothing worse than feeling unauthentic. And I felt like there were times when I felt great.
Right.
There were times when I tried to cover it up, but there's nothing like if I'm a sneaker dude, you know? And so it's hard to tell a knockoff.
Yeah, especially these days.
Come on. And some of them get produced in the same factory.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, what? But I felt like I was produced in the church. I felt like I was raised in the church.
Right.
But there was just little things that was off my character, little things that was off my integrity, little things that was off when, you know, a dime would walk in and I'm married and I'm like, my God in heaven. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But can I say that? Can I be real with myself? Can I say that I struggle? Can I say that sometimes I want to fight? Can I say that sometimes that I'm angry? Can I call in sick?
Right.
If I'm up studying Saturday night and me and my wife get in a fight? I don't work at McDonald's.
Right.
I got to get a sermon when I don't feel it. And I started to feel like a knockoff version of who I'm supposed to be. And I think many people feel that. And they don't know what to do with it.
Right.
They don't have help.
Right.
They don't know that they can be real. They don't know they can be authentic.
Right.
And this is when I felt like I got to the place realizing that freedom was not perfection. Freedom was having nothing to hide.
Wow.
I'm in a place in my life now. I ain't got nothing to hide.
Right.
Talk about it. Put it on the news.
Right.
I'm already talking about it.
Right.
People can't believe I'm being real right now. Why? Well, maybe the enemy can't remind you of stuff if you start talking about it. That's the way I look at life now.
Right. That's powerful. I mean, to be able to release so many of your demons, confront them, and then see it actually help others. Because I think, you know, brothers in your position, they, as much reverence as we have, the human characteristics are all, you're robbed of that.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You know, I just, you know, you got to go to pastor, talk to him about it. You got to be like pastor and his family. But for you to say, I struggle too. Yeah. You know, and those facades, I mean, we speak about identity so much when it comes to mental health. For you, in seeking help, I mean, what were some of those things that you would say did save you? I mean, and we can go spiritual for a moment as well, but I mean, in the idea of like, what were the tools that you implemented to break those chains?
Well, I think if I were to start off, like, for me, it did start with my faith, and my view of faith was jacked up. You know, I grew up in a religious family, so they faithed everything away. I couldn't have ADHD because God don't make broken people. Right. But what's wrong with my brain that I can't focus on nothing? I couldn't read well. That doesn't get healed in my case. Like, I ain't going to no altar call for that. I can't read. Like, what are you going to ask for? Spontaneous, you know, ability to hooked on phonics. You know what I'm saying? But I think realizing and having my own confrontation with who God is to me and what grace is to me. I didn't understand grace. And one of the things that I realized, you know, and when I got my heaviest is I looked at my account and want to see how many reservations, how much money you spend on DoorDash. Come on. Like, man, I'm eating myself to the grave. But I used to love making a reservation. And one thing about making a reservation is when you're late, sometimes they still reserve the table for you because they have something called a grace period. And I felt like I didn't understand that I didn't have to be perfect, didn't have to be on time, that I was never late. Because when I had that understanding and that awareness, I realized that God had a grace period for me. And it doesn't run out. And I think a lot of people are pursuing perfection rather than freedom. Two complete different things.
Really?
This side of eternity, no one's perfect. We all sin, falling short. We all got issues. We all got lust of the flesh. And I think as believers, sometimes we don't negotiate well with the line of holiness and humanity.
Mm.
Is this sin that I think this way?
Mm.
Or am I just human?
Right. Yeah.
Hey, I'm convicted right now talking about it.
Yeah.
I'm just human.
Right.
So if I don't realize that I'm just human, I'm going to hide it.
Right.
I'm going to cover it up.
Right.
I want to be holy.
Right.
Air quotes.
Yeah.
What is that?
Right.
Grace covering me.
Grace. By his grace.
We don't like to talk about grace.
We all need it though.
You ain't lying.
So let's take it into your household.
Oof.
And with you being, one of the great representatives of strong relationships. But it didn't happen overnight for you.
No.
You counsel so many couples. I sit here in the space as a divorced man, and non-traditional relationships and how I'm bringing up my family. I struggle with the concept of 2 equals 1.
Yeah.
But I admire it. Let's dig into, how you got to the space of, love, laughter, and longevity.
Come on. It just sound good. It's tweetable.
But I mean, it feels like you're thriving.
Yeah.
I see it. I'm witnessing it, and I would just love to dig into some of those elements, because as we go from, that conversation about the grace, and
Yeah.
even to hear you share about, when you're at your lowest, not even being in union with your wife at the time. How did you go from there to now what we witness?
I think, first of all, great question. And I think we as a society, as a culture, as humans have a jacked up, including myself, definition of love. So like, man, how many times I've been in love? When I was a little kid, writing, check the box, yes or no,
all that.
How many times I feel the butterflies? Now I ask myself, is it love or lust? Because, look at that booty. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
facts.
But I think I realized when my wife was at her worst, love had an opportunity to be at its best. And here's what I mean by that. Love in our culture is selfish. Love in our culture is, you look good, it's pleasing in my eye. You do this for me, you serve me well. Right? But love in its original form, I'm talking about if we have the idea, and maybe you need to have the idea. I don't know where you are, I respect where you are, but God is love. He doesn't decide to love. He doesn't wake up and say, you know what, you cooked me dinner last night, so I love you. You gave me some last night, so I love you. No, he loves me. But we have those stipulations on love.
Right.
So if God is love, then we have to look at what it does. Ultimately, his love reconciles sin. His love is grace.
Yeah.
So it has to look for everything it's not to be defined in what it is.
Wow.
So 2 equals 1 started when my wife was at rehab and I had given her an ultimatum. And I was passing a church and took a year off, and I changed the locks on the doors and had an attorney and told the kids we was leaving before she gets back. And the counselor looks at me and says, you will never have the wife you want till you learn to love the wife you have. I'm like, first of all, when like somebody gets you, like you with your homies, you don't know what to say in return, but like stupid, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, I'm paying this lady to tell me the truth. And I realized that at that moment, that my version of love was fake because it served me. It didn't serve her. And so what I received from that is I am the only one as her husband that can show her the kind of love that God talks about in Scripture.
Wow.
And that's maybe why in the New Testament, Jesus equates love with how he loves the church. And so I realized that I was a picture of forgiveness. I was a picture of grace. I was a picture of reconciliation and restoration. And how I loved her on earth was how she viewed how God loved her in heaven.
Mm.
So when I say 2 equals 1, I get how hard that is.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me. To tell her everything I'm thinking, to tell her why we can't walk on that side of the beach.
No, right.
Like, to be honest and open, because she loved me.
Right.
Past that. And when I realized this, the counselor went on to say at the end of that session, you can't leave Irene. Because the broken, jacked up, dysfunctional Irene is going to come back changed. And she should have an opportunity to heal the wounds that she created. And that's when I said to myself, how does God love me? He looks for everything I'm not and gives me grace. So my love has to look for everything that's dysfunctional in her.
Right.
And give her grace.
That's powerful. I mean, too, even coming from the infrastructure of a relationship, and then normally, or not normally, but in most cases, it's the woman having to play that position for the man.
Yeah, it's real.
You know what I mean? We're the ones that need grace at that level.
Yeah.
But for you, as the man, to have to deal with that and create and uphold the pulpit.
Yeah.
And all that represents, that has to be heavy on your mental.
Phew.
And wanting to escape.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll bring it home to myself for a moment of you know, the public persona of always having on a smile.
Yeah.
Always, you know, having the joke to crack, or wanting, you know, people to, you know, admire my relationship.
Yeah.
But when you know there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and there's a lot of, you know, darkness in that shadow, even when you know your job is to be the light, advice on how to get through something like that?
I'll say, first, man, keeping it a buck, I had to admit everything I'm not. Like, the whole foundation of what I claim to believe is that God's strength is perfected in my weakness.
Indeed.
So if that's the truth, then why am I leading with how strong I am? Why don't I start leading with how weak I am? And maybe we can flip the script on this thing. I get why people don't do church. I get why people don't do God.
Yeah.
Because church people ain't representing them well. I get it. I did it.
Yeah.
So they can hate all they want. It was me.
Yeah.
So when I think about that, and I think about where I was at, my mental was off. Lexapro, Ritalin, Vyvanse, Popeyes. You get it, right?
Yeah.
Pornography. I was medicating.
Yeah.
I think all of us have a dysfunctional pharmacy that we turn to. And I had to figure out how to turn to a functional pharmacy, which was counseling. Black male going to counseling? You paying for that? Yeah, I'm crazy.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I didn't want a Christian counselor. I don't want to hear about God. I know about that. Tell me why I'm crazy.
Right.
Tell me. That's why I appreciate your show. I'm listening and learning stuff from you, bro. Like 100%. Like you think you on? We talking like you on my couch. I'm on yours too. We learning from each other. We cutting this up. And I think that, you know, recognizing that we're faulted and we're frail and we're insecure. And when I was in counseling, they was like, we got a pill for that. And I was like, I want the pill. That's exactly what I said. And I want it to make me well. But one day, I don't want the pill.
Right.
I want to be whole. I don't want you to treat the symptom. Let's get to the heart. Let's get to the issue.
Right.
And that's when I started unveiling my heart. This is how I think.
Right.
I preached a sermon and thought it was terrible. And people tell me that it was good.
Yeah.
It was awful.
Right.
Right? Like, I think it's difficult for male men at times to deliver when they don't want to go to work. You're a mailman.
Yeah.
You got to deliver content. You got to deliver to your kids. You got the pressure that we as men face, the weight that is on our shoulders. We have to have safe places to do this.
Indeed.
We got to have vulnerable places where people listen without the need to respond. One time my counselor sat there and I was like, I paid her $350 an hour just to listen.
Yep.
And I'm like, man, I'm lonely. Bro, isn't it crazy how many people could follow? I looked at your Instagram, 5 million people.
Yeah.
And how lonely we feel sometimes.
It's heavy.
Daily.
Yeah.
I tried everything else, man.
Feel no one understands you.
They don't.
Yeah.
And then they tell you like, you don't appreciate what you got.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about you lonely.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or you're not grateful. No,
Yeah.
I'm grateful. I'm just empty.
Mm.
And now I just want something or somebody to tell me.
Right.
I told my wife this, I'll never forget it. You know, in our book, we talk about her sexual abuse. She was sexually abused before me. In her book, she has a book, Reframe Your Shame. She talks about it. So an outcome of that or collateral damage is she struggles with affection. Right? I had no idea because I was never a safe place for her to tell me. Right? I'm like, why this girl ain't, you know, I'm a good looking dude. You know what I'm saying? Like, what's going on? You know?
Right.
And realized, I told her one day, I said, hey, there was this individual who touched my shoulder and I noticed and I liked it. And I just want to be honest and vulnerable with you because I need you to make sure I don't like it. Hard for her to hear. But man, I felt so free in that moment that my wife was covering me. So I didn't have to cover it up.
Right.
I think, Nick, the strain we have that culture has placed an expectation on us, it slipped in. It unknowingly slipped in.
Right.
That I can't be real. So I'm going to give you a version of me that you can handle.
Right.
That is why suicide rates are so high. That is why we are going crazy. That's why mental health is where it's at. If we could just be real, old school, keep looking over my shoulder and peeping around corners.
Yeah.
My mind is playing tricks on me. That was me every Sunday.
Man, and I have so many questions in that space because I know there's so many people who feel that way. I mean, and you know, they're not in the pulpit, but they're at their 9 to 5, or they're in their relationship. And they're trying to do what they perceive as right. But, you know, I challenge these ideologies for when what's more important, dealing with one's mental health and accepting who we are, or trying to do what's right. You know, I know personally, and, you know, on these journeys, and, you know, whether, like you said, whether it's pornography and overeating or indulging in whatever, there's things that we struggle with. And I probably lean more towards, well, who's to say this lifestyle isn't for me, as long as I'm happy, or what I believe happiness to be. But, you know, brothers like you and I, you know, have a faith foundation, or the Bible, or, you know, whatever your walk of life is as your moral compass. But there is a generation out there who are content with the low frequency. They're stuck in that space. The masses are there. And we don't see anything wrong with that. You know, there's justification for, it makes me feel good. And so it must be right. So what would be your message to those, I mean, you know, that really are content in their dark space?
Wow. What a question. And I think, thank you for unveiling that, because that's how I feel at times.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
is this real?
Yeah.
You know? And I think for me, I would encourage you, if you're listening, is that understanding the difference between joy and happiness. I think joy is internal. We would know that as a fruit of the spirit.
Yeah.
Right? Happiness is external. And so I have to ask myself, is what makes me happy, or my version of what I call it, is that something external? Is that porn? Is that sleeping around? Is that relationships? Is that work? Is that money? Those are all external. Right? So they can be a mirage to me of happiness.
Right.
But to me, joy is internal. And let me tell you the difference. I feel the difference is this. If it's external, it can eventually hurt me.
Okay.
Now, joy is internal.
Yeah.
The only thing it can do is heal me.
Yeah.
The joy of the Lord is my strength. Happiness of the world, it actually can hurt me.
Right.
I can name everything that people do to make them happy and turn it around and say, it also can hurt you.
It can hurt you. Yeah.
But joy can't hurt you. It can only heal you.
Wow.
It's in here.
Yeah. And that's a very potent concept. Because how does one define the joy? And as we, obviously we wrap up this first session, I think that's a good, teaser as we go into the next session to speak specifically about healing. But we have to differentiate between happiness and joy. Because they can seem like the same thing. On the surface. But like you said, a joyful spirit knows how to take any situation and operate in it. You take happiness away, and
it's real.
Then troubles occur. Then you're depressed. You're things that you felt like, or at least the pursuit of happiness. We do it constantly, whether we're attempting to be successful in the financial aspect, we're attempting to be successful in a relationship. But as soon as you remove those things that we chase, we're empty. Joyfulness doesn't necessarily, your joy with or without those things. So I would ask in conclusion on this first session, as we get into the next session, to specifically talk about healing for a man. In that distinction, how does one differentiate, or for the average person watching, because you and I can speak of the fruits of the spirit, and we can talk about but like if you really if it's a young brother watching this that's really like, man, I've been taught to hustle, I've been taught to grind, I've been taught I gotta get this job, I gotta make this money, I gotta impress this chick. That's what I feel like is joyful. Partying at the club, drinking this drink, like I'm living my best life. But it's actually that pursuit is destroying me, because it's an emptiness if those things aren't present.
Because it's external.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, Nick, while we was in the middle of healing, our journey, which will get us to the next thought, which my wife is 8.5 years sober.
Wow. Congratulations.
Of alcohol. And I've lost 168 pounds, I think.
Wow.
Come on, y'all need to pray for me, because she can't keep her hands off me now.
Facts.
But I went to Nairobi, Kenya on a missions trip. And we were working this orphanage all week, and I saw babies that have never been held. And I saw poverty at its worst. And I remember I had a good idea. I thought it was a good idea. We're going to go into the city hours and get pizza for the kids at the orphanage. And I went, got some pizzas, and we got back, and it was 12 kids. We got 12 pizzas. Each of them had their own pizza. And we gotten around, let's say grace. And we grabbed each other's hand, and I saw tears flowing down. And this little girl to my right named Ann Bless, I said, can you pray? Tears coming down her face. She goes, God is faithful. Pizza? She had something that she could never provide for herself. And me as a father figure brought it to her. And I saw true joy of having something that she couldn't get for herself. She was content with never having it. I didn't know that she had prayed for pizza. But God's faithfulness was pizza to her. Pizza. I went back a year later. Guess what she had hanging on her wall? The pizza box.
Wow.
Started asking myself, and I asked those out there, what have we reasoned away that we'll never have? Because we don't know if our Father will bring it to us. So now we search for happiness. But I saw that day that true joy for that little girl, Ann Bless, was having something that she could not get on her own. My question to the listeners is what have you said is never going to happen? The love of your dad, respect from your wife, peace in your mind, stuff that you can't give yourself. That when you trust him enough, he brings it at the least expected moment where you can say, God is faithful. That moment changed me. I'm praying to change somebody else. Not my sermon, my story that I never thought my marriage would heal. But 8.5 years ago, he brought me pizza.
Powerful, man. And I definitely believe we got to pause there. As we get into our next session where we're going to discuss healing. But, I mean, this was healing in itself.
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate you sharing and being so open, candid, and vulnerable. Because we often see the result and don't understand the journey.
Yeah.
So thank you for taking us through that. And,
Absolutely.
We'll be joined once again. Lock in with us with the good Pastor Reverend.
I just go by Jimmy.
Yeah. Jimmy Rollins.
Absolutely.
Counsel Culture.
Let's go.